The peer support they had, you'll see a Pacific man, a Maori man, an Indian man, a European, Chinese, and they all look at each other, yeah, you look like you would hit your wife. Then the penny drops, we're all here for the same reason. It was 4 out of 14 women killed that year were Indian. 1 in 3 women is abused in her lifetime, and every 4 minutes police go to a call out on domestic violence, and they believe only 20% actually pick up the phone. What about tomorrow?
Yeah.
I want to be safe, I want my children to be safe, but what happens tomorrow when all the services walk away? And that's the hard part. And I think if March 15th has taught something, to the general population, is don't be suspicious of someone that's different. I think with racism being such a big thing at the moment, especially with COVID, I've gone out of my way to actually talk about the racism. Why do you think people don't succeed? They'll say, oh, they don't quite speak English properly, or they don't look the same. And I say, look, I'm 3rd generation, I'm always going to look like this. My grandchildren are going to look like what they are, and yet they have no comprehension of India. Be careful what you say. I'm on that board now.
Got it out.
I used to sit in on the final interview just to say, I says, your qualifications have been checked, you're proficient for your job, and now I'm here to see if you're here to serve. Because if you're not here to serve, whether it's the patient, and working in high needs community, it's very important, your body language, more than the words that come out of your mouth. If someone comes and only has one jumper and he's wearing it all the time, and he works in a smoke environment, of course he's going to smell. And if your face screws up a little bit, you've lost it. You've lost his trust, you've lost his confidence. He's not going to tell you anything. So your body language, are you here to serve? A lot of people come into for jobs saying, I want to do good in South Auckland. And that is fine, but you won't be able to handle the realities when someone says, sorry, I'm half an hour late because it's raining outside and I've got 3 kids to bring with me. And then you could scream, oh, you're making me late. That kind of attitude. So you've got to be really empathetic and put yourself in someone else's shoes. And if you haven't been in that space, when you talk to the families in South Auckland, there is no food in the house. If it's a loaf of bread and a tin of baked beans, that may be all they do have. And so you don't judge, and that's very important sitting in on the last interview, that what empathy you show. So are you here to serve is so important to us. We employed a lot of the unemployables, all the doctors that came over from overseas that can't get registered here, the nurses, especially Pacific, Tongan and Samoan in particular, they just couldn't pass the English test. And my nurse leader, who's a Kiwi, would say, I wouldn't be able to pass the English test, and they're expected to. But the clinical knowledge and ability they had, they made excellent navigators that went to the homes to assess home situations, and they got a lot more done. So we employed a lot of those, which became patch protective again, because they weren't doctors, they weren't nurses, but in their own country they may have been specialists running hospitals, but in New Zealand they were nobody. And they were earning $20, $25 an hour when they really should have been earning $120 an hour, because they just weren't certified here. And we get lauded for being positive inclusion and being very diverse workforce. The reality was nobody wanted to work in South Auckland. And so we did get all the migrants, and we did get all the immigrants that were here that couldn't get jobs. And so, when we entered the diversity awards, they were EEO awards then, they kept asking the staff, so in this project, and they just went blank. There is no project here, this is just business as usual. It's not, we went out to be inclusive.
In terms of, like when you were starting out with your husband, like what was did you have any particular mission or goal or values in
No, necessity.
Yeah.
Survival. Because so you've obviously looked on the internet, but my story is on 27th of November I went to India met my husband on the 30th of November, married him on the 8th of December, 47 years ago. So, you know, it was an arranged marriage. My parents did their homework, sent me over, and when we came back and he couldn't get registration, no one would tell him what to sit. It was like, get the registration and we'll give you a job. Get a job and we'll give you registration. It took 10 months for someone that's been at the top of their class in India at the best university to have to face that is really morale breaking. And then he wanted to be a specialist. When you're sort of academically inclined, he says, I want to be a specialist. And his mentor did say, those exact words you repeated, that, you know, New Zealand's not ready for a coloured specialist with an accent. You won't get any referrals. So you need to work in an area that looks like you and sounds like you. And as it happened, a practice in Otara came on the market. And so we borrowed 110%, and even that, no one would give us money. So the lawyer says, well, you've got no assets. He wouldn't release the documents because you're not going to pay my fees. And then when we did, we couldn't get a loan. So my father, my auntie who lives in Puki, owns quite a lot of properties there, called the bank manager on a Sunday night and said, look, good up-and-coming couple, support them. And so, he on a Sunday night signed our mortgage documents, and gave us. And so you don't forget the people. Mm-hmm. And so, it's not all easy. The business we purchased was 9 to 12 and 3 to 5. That was not going to pay our mortgage. That was not going to pay our loan back. So, and we realised people in South Auckland, a job is more important, and you're not going to take time off. The car went with the person that had the job. The mum was left at home with the kids. No phones, no transport. And so if they couldn't get there in those times without an appointment, they weren't going to come. So the first thing we did was no appointments and opened our surgery at 8 o'clock to 6 o'clock. And I became the receptionist, then the typist, the cleaner, whatever needed doing. So no great visions of being...
In terms of, I guess, like how your maybe vision, values, whatever mission developed over the years, would you say, 10 years ago to now, is it quite different, or do you have particular like core beliefs or something, core values that you're driven by?
I think I've just got over my imposter syndrome, hence doing things like this. Because what I found perhaps 10 years ago is very few women and very few ethnic women get asked to speak. I get so scared when I speak. I start off like I'm going to cry. My voice cracks, and then I get my mojo and I get going. If it's a topic that is passionate to me, but I think probably from that time I realised I had a voice and I could speak to make a difference and to encourage people. So when I do get asked to speak, and if I'm not able to, I'll recommend someone else to say, look, sorry, I can't do it, but I can get you another ethnic voice. Is it the tick box for the brown girl, that you need on stage? I'll get you someone. So it gives, a pathway for young people to get there, because you just don't get the opportunity.
I walk in the room and I notice that I'm the only woman, or I'm the only white person, or not one person, or, having that as, I think people don't realize how, like, you live with that. It's not like a...
And that reality really hit home after March 15th, because, through our work life, first of all, because we grew very quickly since we opened our doors, our fees, and my husband said, don't worry about the money. If people can pay, that's fine, but it's not going to make us rich. $10 at a time isn't going to make us rich, so don't worry about that. We just look after the family and that loyalty. So I never had a marketing budget, because that our customer service is more of the marketing. For giving the $10, is the marketing budget. And we grew and grew. So the mainstream, and they were all British arrived GPs in the area. That would be there for 10, 12 years and then move off because it's too hard, and would complain. So we would be audited. And what my children saw was every, Christmas, Easter, just before the holidays, an audit would come through. And so, you know, being at EY, when an audit comes through, you've got to get all your documents ready. Every single NHI, you've got to get all the documentation. So all our holidays would be spent doing that. Now they saw that and they thought, oh, it's normal. You just get treated like that. So when March 15th came up, you know, they were so angry, saying, you know, my girlfriend that said, don't come to my birthday party because you don't wash your brown, you know, saying we are one. Which paradigm do they live in? You know, they were so angry. My older son was even more. He's 45. And so, you know, he was really angry, being the only Indian at school, at a private school. He really, you know, said, well, you know, I had a lot of experiences, but we just thought it was normal because we saw what you do. And then my younger says, it doesn't change, you know, and he's 30. So, you know, has anything changed? Not really. And that that made me realize just how much children will do what they see, not what you tell them. No, the world's your oyster. You can do anything. What they see is what's ingrained a lot more than no matter how much you push. And that's with domestic violence. You know, it's intergenerational because children see dad hitting mum and mum not saying anything. And then the girl thinks, well, you know, you just live with it. And the boy thinks, well, dad did it and it was okay. Because, you know, there's no one to correct that path. And the psychiatrist on my advisory board for Gandhi Nivas says it's going to take 3 generations to get that out of the system.
How did you, you know, with Gandhi Nivas, like what was it some particular topic that you were already kind of involved in or interested in when you were doing your healthcare work? Or is it something, because I know someone came to you and asked you to provide, was it just, you know, yeah, were you already involved in
No. I sit on the police advisory board for Counties Manukau. And in 2014, in the beginning, the data from 2012 and 13 showed 4 out of 14 women killed were Indian, which is 29% when the population back then was about 3%. And so completely out of kilter. And so the area commander said, especially in South Auckland, the Indian population's growing and there's a big problem in your community that you need to advise it. And so I got all the NGOs together. It wasn't a passion or anything. All the NGOs together to say, what's missing in here? Then I went to MIT to do a family harm course to understand, you know, what triggers or how does it work or what's New Zealand's system that we're failing these women. And I've got 6 granddaughters and I didn't like those stats. So I thought, okay, I've got to do something about it. So I got all the NGOs together to say, what is it do we need? And they said, the only way men can get help, even if it's, police did something really good in 2010 in a police safety order, which meant the woman and the children could stay home and the man's removed. But they remove the man, but they don't give him any support or counselling or to change behaviour. And so he would sleep in the car, get extra drunk or go to a mate's house saying she kicked me out, wait till it happens next time, just got worse. So the providers said, oh, we need, you know, a home and we need service not Monday to Friday 9 to 5. We need it because most incidents happen in the evening and in the weekend. We need a 24/7 service. Now that made sense to me because in health, if you have a heart attack and you're a smoker, we pounce on you to say, you know, you've got to stop, otherwise you've got a 5% more chance of having another heart attack. It made sense. You know, when that pain's gone of a heart attack in 24 hours, you know, 3 days, 4 days, you forget. And that's the same with this. When you're angry and you have the incident, if this and you're in the system, it takes 6 weeks to get before a court, 6 weeks before anger management. You've forgotten what you've argued about. And the other stat is that over 90% of women take the men back. And so if you know, do call the police and they're angry, the second time you dare pick up the phone, it's going to get worse. And so, you know, they said bricks and mortars is what we need. We'll provide the counselling service. Then the question came, how much money will you pay us? I said, I don't have any. I'll do the bricks and mortar, but you've got to do the counselling. Let's make this a partnership. And so from 20 NGOs in the room, it dwindled down to 3 or 4. Then when it came to the next meeting, it was one group that stood up. And they said, no, we will do it because we work in this space. and we know it's important. So with fundraisers, and I just went to all Indian businesses and said, we've got a problem in our community. I'm doing a fundraiser, and you know, it made it ownership. The whole house that we did, all furniture donated by the Indian community. But within 3 months, there was no other facility in Auckland, let alone New Zealand, that actually had the 24/7 and free service. And so they opened it up to everybody. And now my data is more Pacific, Maori, European than Indian. The service works for everyone. And I put in, because this wasn't my area of expertise, I put in evaluation from day one. So Massey, you know, well registered, Massey University, in the first 12 months they analysed the first time. 93% of those men did not reoffend again. Now I couldn't put my hand on my heart and say that's change behaviour. 12 months is not really change behaviour. That's why we did the 5-year research. And with the 5-year research, we actually took the point, and 5 years before all the incidents the men had, and 5 years after, to see exactly what the pattern was. And this is supposed to be early intervention where they didn't get a criminal record. You know, she didn't get hit or she wasn't, but the police have just removed him. And nearly 60% of men did not reoffend in that period. So what we thought was early interventions changed, and it was 5 different sets of data. We had people self-refer, saying once they knew about it, saying, can I spend the night? I'm at my trigger point. And so to me, success is actually when the men actually pick up the phone and say, can I come and spend the night? Because they've recognised they're about to snap. Same principle as AA, that you talk to someone when you're ready. And, you know, this is phenomenal. We knew we were doing good, but when you have data to prove it, it gives you credibility. And now, you know, the next stages will be, how do we work with iwi? How do we we've got 3 in Auckland now. And all 3 are very different demographics, in ethnicity-wise. And so, you know, it showed that just being focused on what the man needs is the important part. The next day, another set of counsellors go to the woman and the home. Is this the last straw on the camel's back, or is this the first time and you got frightened? Do you need to be removed to women's refuge? You know, so giving them that support. And the children, you know, it's not okay. You can pick up the phone. You can dial 111. And once anyone's in the system and the phone rings again, you know, police react very quickly. When you don't get government funding, you can make up your own rules. You can do things differently.
Like from your experience now, like over the years with Gandhi Nivas, like what have you found? Do you kind of have similar beliefs, or is it a bit different? Do you think there could be replicate? Like, can the government replicate something across the whole country and somehow do that central government approach, or is it a community-based?
As long as they don't own it. They muck up everything by having to be bureaucratic. If you give it to business or if you give it to community, they will know what common denominator needs to be delivered. Like, you know, our blueprint for Gandhi Nivas is, this is what you have to do. And then you add your cultural or your social lens on top of it. If someone's never had a job and you find him a job, he is forever grateful to you. Even if it's, you know, just taking them for an interview, doing their CVs. So, you know, Bill English, when he was in power, said, I've put this cross-agency in. And I said, you're a 3-year government. Cross-agency doesn't work, because by the time you get your act together and you get everybody's got to shine that I did this. If it's a joint effort from 8 different, because you've got education, health, corrections, justice, you know, police, you've got so many, MSD, you've got housing, you know, you've got everybody. And if everybody puts something into this, and then we adapt it to what the person needs, because family harm is, you know, we're only touching 10-12% of the 10-12% that ring actually for help. So that's 1% of people that we're actually targeting.
Yeah. what's kind of your experience been with that? Like, how did you find that, doing your work over the years, you got more, I don't know, maybe either optimist or pessimist or realist, or do you find, like, what's your relationship to this, like, overwhelming, oh my God, there's so much to do?
I now openly say what I think, but it took me till 65 to do that. Whereas, you've got to be a lot younger to make a difference. I do now well as connecting people. If I see someone should be put on this board, I'll recommend them. And sort of got to a position where that carries weight. And so, when you're talking to anything and I see a gap, I don't have the competencies to do at the thing. So I look for the best people around. Like with Gandhi Nivas, I actually do very little. I'm just the conductor in the middle. The service is done by the counselling services. The police are the referrers, but somehow just couldn't work because they just needed this bricks and mortar in the middle. And it seems so easy to do when you stand back and do it. So I'm in that space saying, oh yeah, that's easy enough to do. We just need to do this and get this person to do it, and I'll ring this person. COVID, at the temple, a lot of Kenyan students that have been here 10, 12 years and that have settled here came to me to say, we should do something. We're all at home. We're all professionals. So shall we just collect money and give it to someone that's doing it? I says, well, what are you thinking of doing? He says, food parcels. Do it from the temple. What do you need? So I rung people in Pukekohe, and my daughter, who's well connected, to say, okay, I'm doing this. My brothers in Hamilton got a supermarket, put me in touch with Pack and Save, saying, okay, my charity is, I'll give you 50% discount, take whatever you want. Everybody just donated generously. And then when my daughter got involved, because she knew a lot of growers that all the restaurants were closed, all the gourmet potatoes, gourmet tomatoes, I was putting those in the food pack. Yeah. You're doing it all. I'm just linking you up with everybody. From a Hindu temple, getting Pacific and Maori come to get food packs. It was just phenomenal. What we found by doing that is the Maori wardens turned up the first week saying, you don't seem to be managing this flood of people. So they just went back to their car, put on their jackets, how can we help? And then when we did a second one, we proactively called them, help! And, they just put on their jackets and they did it. Never been into a Hindu temple. So, before we start, we'd give them a meal. After they finished, they'd come in and, just sit in there. Oh, so this is how it works, breaking those barriers.
What's the, I guess now you mentioned you're supposed to be retiring and stuff. Like, what are some of the things that, I don't know, if you don't think about all the main boards and the work you're doing, like what kind of fills you up with joy? Like what do you enjoy doing, or what are you looking forward to?
My grandkids. They're the inspiration. You can hear it in their voice, and having 6 girls and a boy, you forget about the kids, they don't count anymore. You just worry about the grandkids, and you can see that to give them that positive. And every single personality is different. One is still debating and getting upset about picking the right subjects. The other one says, "Oh, I did it ages ago. I've got twins." Apart from being a visitor, and when I go to India, it's like, "Are you recording?"
It's great. It works. Yeah. Natural conversation.